fad, that's a blow over. But you have to understand there are deep demonic spiritual roots in this. And so, as much as we want to be loving and compassionate, but we also want to fight for these kids because they are under a demonic deception. This is an ancient pagan religion. So, I'm going to have him tell a little bit. You can start with that slide. Just read the.
Ecclesiastes 1 9 to 10. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already long ago. It was here before our time. So there's nothing new under the sun. Isaiah 48 says, the grass withers, the flowers fades, but the word of our God stands forever. All right, and then Inanna. In ancient Samaria was known for its worship of Inanna, also known as Ishtar, a goddess of love and sexuality. Inanna, Eshtoreth, Asherah, Astarte, and Ishtar are all manifestations of the same goddess who is worshipped in different regions. The Hebrews called her Eshtoreth, the female deity of the Phoenicians, associated with Baal, the supreme god. Inanna was often said to be female, but sometimes described as a bearded man. Individuals living outside the gender binary were heavily involved and associated with the cult of Inanna. Members were known for androgyny. Shattering the boundary between the sexes was seen as a way of rising above the prison of the flesh. She was said to have the power to turn men into women and to women into men. And so remember that Inanna, or Ishtar, was a goddess of love. The LGBTQ are claiming love, but it's not God's love. It's the ancient pagan false love, a sensual love revolving around indulging in whatever sexual pleasure you desire. Okay, and then in the Greece, Hermaphroditus, in Greek mythology, was the son of Hermes and Aphrodite, the water nymph Salmacis. Seeing him bathing in a pool, fell in love with him and prayed that they might never be separated. And so the gods interpreted her request literally and joined the pair into one body. Hermaphroditus became a symbol of androgyny and effeminacy. Epaphrodites, I can't read, that made it worse, is in the shadow there, who had part male and part female characteristics, they were widely celebrated, both socially and spiritually, and were considered to be servants of the gods and goddesses. And in many ancient cultures, the androgen was even worshipped as being divine in nature. In other words, in ancient culture, occult, and mystery religion belief systems, the androgynous boy-girl, or he-she, today it's known as binary or gender fluid, was raised to divine status. And a person's transformation to that state of being, was considered to be a transcendental perfection. How do you say that word? Dionysus, right? Dionysus. I don't know that God that well. That's okay, isn't it? All right. The god of wine and wild parties was another god known for an androgynous appearance. Okay, and then you go to Arabia. Makanathan were known as the effeminate ones, men who resemble women, males who functioned sexually and sometimes socially as women. Oh, that's better. Yeah. Often as male servants they were often male servants for wealthy women because it was believed that they did not desire women sexually, although it was discovered many of them did. Then let's go to India. The Hiras and the Ardhanarashivara. It's easy for you to say, right? So the Hiras were males who wanted to express their feminine gender identity, and they often lived in communities with a guru, a master, who supported them financially and emotionally. So the Hiras often held various important administrative positions during the Mughal rule. Does that sound familiar? Administrative positions, right? Nothing new under the sun. So they were celebrated in ancient Indian texts and art. And then this big long word, Ardhanarishvara. Ardhanarishvara. Okay, everybody repeat it after me. Is a composite deity in Hindu mythology, comprising the masculine god Shiva and the feminine goddess Parvati. The name Ardhanarishvara means the Lord who is half woman. And it symbolizes the union of the male and the female aspects of the divine. Shiva and Parvati are depicted as a single being with both male and female characteristics. And according to the Advaita Vedanta philosophy of Hinduism, the ultimate reality is a consciousness that is beyond gender, form, and male or female attributes. And this form symbolizes the unity and balance of masculine and feminine energies in the universe. The goal of this spiritual practice is to realize the non-binary nature of reality and to attain liberation known as moksha. Liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Contemplation or meditation of this form, this belief, is believed to aid in the attainment of spiritual enlightenment. Okay, let's go to ancient Rome. In ancient Rome, the Galli priests worshiped the great goddess Cybele. The priests wore saffron robes and they would clash their cymbals as they would walk down the streets. And they also castrated themselves. So, self-castration was a way to show their devotion to their goddess. And it was an initiation into that cult. And so after they were castrated, they dressed exclusively in women's clothing and jewelry. And so they received clothes and other goods from women in exchange for telling their fortunes. All right, one more. Native American. Okay, so the indigenous individuals who identified as Two-Spirit, which is a term that came out in 1990, I think, but this concept has been around for a very long time before the settlers came. But they're known now as Two-Spirit folks. They were seen as gifted and honored in their community because they carried two spirits with them, both male and female. Two-Spirit folks were often the healers, the medicine people, and the visionaries within their given community, and they were foundational members of their culture. So the term Two-Spirits came out so you could differentiate between native and non-native LGBT, right? So the native LGBT are known as the Two-Spirit. And traditionally, Native American Two-Spirit people were male, female, and sometimes intersexed individuals who combined activities of both men and women with traits unique to their status as Two-Spirit people. In most tribes, they were considered neither men nor women. They occupied a distinct alternative gender status. And so the Two-Spirit identity was widely believed to be the result of supernatural intervention in the form of visions or dreams, and it was sanctioned by the tribal mythology. So in many tribes, Two-Spirit people filled special religious roles as healers, shamans, and ceremonial leaders. So there's some of the history. Nothing is new under the sun.
Thank you, Perry. Appreciate you sharing that out. And it's interesting as I was thinking about the the Native American two-spirit. Oh, I forgot about this video. Do y'all have this video? I missed one back there. I forgot about this one. Okay, while they're looking for that, if it was. Uh, Okay, I'll see if it works. This is an interesting video. This is a lady named Camille Paglia. She is a lesbian and not a Christian by her own admission, but she studied art history and she has seen what's happened in culture when you can see transgenderism rising in a culture. And so she's a little hard. She talks very fast, but let's see if you can hear this clip. You hear it? So she talks about how this was, in culture. You can see this over and over and over again, just like we've shown you these things exist in culture, but it's always at the decline of a culture that this leads to the culture kind of unraveling. And because we know that this leads to the destruction of the family. I'm hearing in mass numbers people leaving their families, married men and women leaving their families to go pursue these lifestyles. This is a demonic deception. And as much as we love and have compassion for the people that are caught up in this, but we've got to fight for God's truth on this. And so, this term non-binary, this is actually when I was first went into a transgender lifestyle, it was for the most part, there were very few people who identified as kind of in between, or there was a girl in our support group who called herself her own special snowflake. She just wanted to be like not a gender that anyone else had, apparently. But for the most part, people were very black and white. I am a man or I'm a woman, as trans, so I would have said I was a man, didn't want to be any part female. But there is a rising trend of kids wanting to be very gender fluid, of saying some days I feel this way, some days I feel another. But I think this drive toward androgyny, this is an ancient demonic pagan belief that they believe that the kind of the ultimate ascended state through many of these religions was to be both male and female. It was actually a distortion of the creation story because we know that God created male and female as two separate, individual, unique, and both equally valued but differently designed creatures. That we are both made in God's image, but we are two distinct sexes as male and female. But what the pagans often taught, and in various religions, was that male and female were once one being, and God got angry and split them into two beings. So male and female was seen as a result of God's anger rather than a result of God's goodness. So some ways they identify, and a lot of these kids are just making up terms, and this stuff is all over the internet. So some ways to identify in relation to the binary between or such as on a spectrum, sometimes back and forth. Sometimes one is a little more on top of another. Sometimes, depending on the weather. these things just get to where they don't make sense to us, but these kids are really believing these things. Androgyny was often portrayed as a single body with two heads, one male or one female, and two bodies that were joined together. This was, again, I want to emphasize that this was in the pagan culture, this was seen as a good thing. It was seen as worship to their gods to be both male and female. So, non binary really means not relating to, composed of, or involving just two things. That's what the term literally means. But it's funny because as you study, not only are we created binary as male and female, but ultimately our DNA is a programming language, and its very basic level. Um, we are composed of binary, um, almost like switches for different characteristics of male or female. So there are these people that are rebelling against this and saying, break the binary. And this is becoming a celebrated thing in culture to break this binary. It's rebellion to God to say that God did not create us binary, that God did not create us male or female, and I'm going to define my gender. So I thought I fixed this, but sorry, I always have trouble with that slide. Okay, this is a guy that I've met on just through Twitter and like on some messages. I've never met him in person, but just an amazing story. His name was James Shoup. His original articles are under Jamie Shoup. He goes by James, but he was the first legally declared non-binary person. And because of him, a lot of states have changed their laws. And I mean, he really started the ball rolling on all of this. But a lot of people don't know that he came out of that lifestyle. He came to Christ, and in fact, my story had a big influence on him. And so this has been an incredible thing. He's kind of gone under the radar now. I haven't seen anything on him recently, but just an incredibly brave man that really spoke out against this, and he just got annihilated in the media. But very, very brave man. So a lot of these people, there's another one there's a documentary. I don't remember the name of the documentary, but this girl that was in a documentary celebrating trans and how she was born this way and all this when she was a teenager. She's since come out of the lifestyle as well. So all these people that are celebrated in the media, you never hear about it on the other side. But just to go through a little bit of how this got into our modern culture, because this is an ancient thing. You know, this has been around since the beginning of time, and this is throughout many cultures. But again, we see this toward the end of culture, toward the decline. But there have been people in our history. This is one who went by Jack Williams. Her name was Frances Clayton, but she wanted to fight in the war, and so she fought in the Civil War dressed as a man. There were these two, Stella and Fanny. Their real names were Ernest Bolton and Frederick Park. They were arrested in 1870 by the London police and charged with conspiring and inciting persons to commit an unnatural offense. They lived together as women, which is interesting. Whoa, that just got louder. A lot of people don't realize that there are a lot of transgender people who either live with their natural opposite sex, or I've known a lot of men who lived like two gay men would transition and then live as lesbians. It's actually quite common. This was one of the first really transition surgeries here in the U.S. Well, the surgery was overseas, but this guy was really celebrated. He was a soldier, and he was the first American trans person to undergo sex reassignment surgery. And he said, "We didn't start this sexual revolution, but I think we gave it a good kick in the pants." He was celebrated in this culture, and because of him, hundreds of men were interested in having sex reassignment surgery after this, and it just opened Pandora's box. But a lot of people don't understand the sexual ties to these things that are being sold to these kids. But he made his living as a nightclub entertainer. This has a very sexual element to it. And then we see this in Hollywood. I'm going to go through this part fairly quickly. I just want to illustrate how this has progressed, because what happens is when Christians don't speak up, things that start very taboo, and it's like you know how your kids will kind of push the boundaries a little bit, and then if mom and dad don't make a big deal of it, well, I'll push it a little more, and I'll push it a little more. And that's kind of what the enemy just chips away, and he chips away, and he chips away. And so this started as being a very taboo thing. There were very few people, but it was it would kind of put it out there. But then it just grew and grew and grew, and the culture has begun to celebrate this more. And for decades, Christians and the church have not spoken out about these things. And we really didn't speak out about this until it was our kids in our own church. And shame on the church for not speaking up about this. And like I said earlier, I love the church. I'm not beating up on the church, but we have got to speak to cultural issues, because if not, we're the salt. Salt is supposed to prevent decay. And instead, we've just been letting it decay. And we've been complaining about the politics. And the whole time, the answer was speaking the truth on these issues and spreading the gospel. So this is another one, these examples of some movies. There was a quote I heard one time where it said, I don't remember who it was attributed to, but what is accepted in one generation is celebrated, or what is made fun of in one generation is accepted in the next generation and then celebrated in the next generation. And that's true. We had these movies back in the 30s to the 50s of just totally making fun. This was just a kind of a laughingstock thing. But then it grew as unisex clothing becomes more common. In the 70s, you have entertainers that are cross-dressing like David Bowie and Elton John and others who are just really pushing the gender norms, not necessarily claiming they're trans, but really pushing those boundaries. Um, so transgenders and drag queens were really living in the shadows back then. This is another one. The two men on the left have both come to Christ. I really don't know anything about the one on the right. I just found that picture. But the one in the top left there, his name is Perry Desmond. He died a long time ago, but he has this amazing book that was out of print. They just recently reprinted it. I'm so glad. He shares this story of the hellish life he lived in the drag queen scene. He was on a tour called the Jewel Box Review, going all over the country. And he said, out on stage, they look like they are just living the life, and everybody's celebrating them and fawning all over them, and they have all these fans. And he said back in the dressing rooms, it was nothing but drugs and sex and alcohol, and trying so hard to cover their pain. And I wish he was still alive, but his book has just been reprinted, and I think it's just called Perry. At least the original book was. But then we have people like Michael Jackson and Prince that, just really beginning to push the gender boundaries even further. And then cross-dressing in comedy is becoming more and more common, with people like Tim Curry and Robin Williams playing Mrs. Doubtfire and other things like that. But, in fact, this Joe Sears, this is actually a guy from my hometown of Bartlesville, Oklahoma. He was from Bartlesville, and he played all these female characters. And we have a park in Bartlesville it's like an amusement park, but for toddlers. Seriously, it's for like 3 to 6 years old. And they put a statue of this guy outside the kiddie park as a memorial to him. It's just disgusting to me. So their drag queens were really beginning to gain fame. I remember seeing this stuff on TV when I was a teenager. And this was my first exposure to the drag scene. And Maury Povich, I remember, had these people parading out one time, and he said, was having the audience guess if they were men or women. I remember being so shocked sometimes because these men were so convincing that they were women, and it became really hard to tell whether they were men or women. And think about the Disney messages that we've been feeding our children for so long. And I don't know if you've realized now with some of the stuff Disney's coming out, Disney's a really evil company, and they are intentionally corrupting our children and trying to indoctrinate them into their beliefs. And this message of follow your heart is not biblical. And we have seen, I've heard so many Christians telling young people, you can be whatever you want to be. You can do whatever you want, do whatever your heart desires. That is not biblical. God has a plan and a purpose for us. He created us for His purpose and His glory, not ours. And all of and the Bible says your heart is deceitfully wicked. It's deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. And in fact, we are to not embrace ourselves. We're to embrace who God created us to be, but we are to deny ourselves, to pick up our cross and follow Christ, because this is all about His glory and not ours. This is about His life. In fact, Paul said that he was crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life that I now live, I live in the flesh. I live by faith in the Son of God. This is all about Christ and His life. But think about The Little Mermaid, about this plotline. I loved this movie as a little kid. I wouldn't admit this when I was living as trans, that I liked The Little Mermaid, but as a little kid, I really loved this movie. But think about the plotline. So you have this girl who lives in her dad is the king, which first of all, representative of God. But she goes up to a place where she is forbidden to go. up to the surface because he knew it was dangerous. She sees something that she wishes she was. It's full of, jealousy and envy, but she wants to be like the humans that she sees. She basically sells her soul to the devil. I mean, it's in exchange for her voice. But in the end, she gets everything she wants, and her dad realizes that she was right all along. This is a demonic plotline that's couched in such an innocent movie. But things like this taught our kids that they know better than the parents. And in fact, kids are being told at very young ages that they know better than their parents. Movies are full. Have you ever noticed how many movies in the last 10 to 15 years are full of child heroes? Not that we want to encourage kids to be heroes, but there are so many movies that are highlighting kids as being better than the adults, of knowing more than the adults, and they're making it look like kids know more than the adults. And it's no wonder that they are, in fact, there's a new trend of what they're calling Generation Alpha, of where these, they say that kids just see no need for their parents at all. They don't want their parents. They have the internet. They have the world knowledge at their fingertips, and they see no reason to have parents. So then we have these movies portraying trans as victims and then celebrated as heroes. And when Bruce Jenner came out, it was like a floodgate opened. I don't know if anybody remembered, but all of a sudden you could see the tide turning and all of these trans people coming out. And just like when the guy that had sex change surgery back in the 50s, this is when people don't realize the influence you can have just by, you don't even have to tell people to do this, just by people saying that this is who I am and this is what I'm doing. It has an enormous influence on other people. And now it's gone off the rails. We have, this is being pushed in cartoons. At one point I saw there were 82 cartoons last I looked up of that had LGBT characters. There are now drag kids, and there's a show on Netflix called Drag Kids. And they are, this one particular kid, there was the one here on the right, in the upper right, he was, his mother got mad. She had this kid in nightclubs, and he was dancing around in a bar that was normally a gay strip club, and he had on a little outfit, barely. I mean, he was covered, but they were stuffing money in his outfit like he was a stripper. And then there was a pedophile from England who started talking about how cute this boy was and how much he liked him, and the mom got really mad. She's the one putting him out there, and she should be in jail for child abuse. And there's a couple more pictures of him, but it's sick what they've done to this kid. And here's another one that this kid, they had him posing with this man that was completely nude, and he was kind of he had himself tucked, but he was completely nude. So I know a lot of that is, I don't like to give lots of bad information, but honestly, we need to understand how destructive this is. And yet, we see what God can do. There is no darkness that God can overcome. There is no pit. I love that. There's a quote by Corrie ten Boom. She said, "There's no pit so deep that God is not deeper still." No matter what they've done, no matter how far they've run, no matter what they do to their body, God can redeem all of these things. And ultimately, this is all for his glory. Whatever they do to their body, whatever they do to their life, one day God is going to redeem all these things. They will have an eternal purpose in his kingdom, and they will have a resurrected body that will not bear the scars anymore, because Jesus bears those scars for us for all eternity. He's taken all those things. And so there is hope despite all the darkness. So I went over this slide a little bit earlier on a different presentation, but really want to hit this point home, that gender transition is like a plane ride that never lands. No matter what people say, how happy they are and how glad they are they're doing this, but it's always this excitement of what they're going to achieve one day. I was so aware that everything I was doing was fake, but it was like, well, one day this will be real. So the effect of celebrating sin in the world presents these problems. You don't like yourself? Well, recreate yourself. You don't fit in? You have a community that accepts you. Feel like a nobody? You can become a celebrity. Are you jealous of others? Become what they are. You don't like your periods? Become a boy. I mean, seriously, and these girls are being told that they can just, if you don't like puberty, well, you don't have to go through puberty. You can just become a boy instead. Most in the LGBTQ, though, have a lot of emotional trauma. Now there are, as I talked about in an earlier presentation, there are kids who are just genuinely confused, who really don't understand this. They've heard this on TV, they're hearing it at school. There was a case I knew of where a friend of mine, a friend of hers actually, their twin girls, they were like 4, came home from preschool one day, and they said, "Mommy, guess what we heard in school today?" And she's thinking, a new color, a new letter. And they said, "We learned we might have boys inside us." And so there are kids that are genuinely just confused. They don't understand any of these things. But for the most part, kids that are struggling with this probably have a lot of emotional trauma. It can be physical, emotional, or spiritual. Might be real or perceived. It's often from a parent, but it can also be from peers or sexual relationships. So, and we talked about how when kids have issues with the parents, we have to remember that a child cannot have the same perspective that we have. They don't understand the brokenness of this world, and they don't understand that God can heal, that God can redeem, that we can be forgiven, that relationships can heal. And so they just don't have that perspective. And a lot of times those things become buried. Like my parents didn't know that I'd been sexually abused until I was in my 30s. That happened when I was 8. And so there's so much that happens that just gets buried deep down inside. My mom had no idea how much she'd hurt me because I never told her. And so sometimes even if I've heard so many parents say, "My kid is saying all these things that happened, I don't remember any of this," or "It wasn't like that." Sometimes they just have really wrong memories. This actually happens as they begin to believe these things, or sometimes the memories are just very distorted. But we have to understand that they're in real pain. So there's kind of this is what I was talking about earlier with this perception of your dad when you're a child is so much bigger. Well, that's kind of the way some of these problems are too. To a little child, something that may seem we just said in frustration, something we didn't mean, may be very damaging to a child. Other causes, sometimes experimentation. There are in I'm from Oklahoma, and we live in Oklahoma City, but we had a guy come into the ministry one day, and he was talking to my boss, so this is what he told me, that this kid, they were from rural Oklahoma, a little town out in the country, and he said, "I've got to tell you something." He said, "All of the guys on the football team," and he emphasized, "all of the guys on the football team are experimenting sexually with each other. They're being encouraged to just try it." And we have heard more and more stories like this that kids are being encouraged, just try it, just see if you like it. The awkwardness of puberty, not liking puberty, and these kids are not being told that this is normal. This is a normal part of development, and yes, it's hard and awkward. And I think part of it is these kids have grown up in so much comfort and ease. And in fact, in the Bible, where it talks about the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah, it's either Ezekiel or Isaiah, and it says that they lived in ease and comfort, and they had pride in their heart. And our kids are honestly, most of them are very spoiled, and they don't understand that this life is hard. I had no idea how how hard life was until I got into adulthood, and I think our kids are honestly just very spoiled. They've grown up on nothing but technology and entertainment, and they don't understand that there are going to be hard things in life. So when they encounter hard things, all they want to do is make it go away. They're wanting to fit in. There's confusion from media and school and culture and other friends. This is the perfect storm against these kids. There's other family members who come out who just cause them to question. There's a lady that I've spoken with before named Denise Schick. She has a ministry out in North Carolina called Help for Families, and she's great with helping families that have young children or, well, really anybody. She helps parents as well, but she's written some great children's books. And one of the things that I love about that she said, when her dad came out as transgender when she was a little girl, it automatically, her dad didn't encourage her to be a boy or anything, but it made her question whether she was supposed to be a boy. Because if dad is really a girl, how do I know that I'm really a girl? And so sometimes just those other family members can cause confusion. And so that's why we have to be, sometimes we're so concerned about the one child who's wandered away, and we want to reach that one, but we also have to be careful of the influence they're having on the rest of the family, especially with younger children. Sometimes there's just pressure to conform. There's peer pressure. Sometimes there's a desire to be someone they're not. This is a counterfeit offer from Satan of what God offers. They need to be born again. They know there's something wrong and they want to be someone greater than they are. They want to be not broken anymore. They want to be this amazing person, but they don't understand that God wants that for them too because they're broken under the curse of sin. What they need is to be born again. This is a counterfeit offer. So the new identity trumps all previous knowledge or connections. Once they start to believe this, sometimes they will shut out everything else. They all of experience is filtered through the lens of a new identity, and they push away any information that doesn't conform to their new belief. Family dynamics and roles. Sometimes a parent may have wanted a different sex child. I've heard stories of where children overheard their parents talking about that. Maybe one family has all girls. Sometimes, even if the parent doesn't say it, just the reality of there being only one sex in the family and the child knows they're supposed to be male and female, that can cause confusion to a young child. I've heard cases where parents have cross-dressed their children, or one sex of child gets different treatment from parents. That was, even if it's not true, my perception was that my brother got a lot different treatment, but sometimes that's just reality. Sometimes just for personality reasons or whatever it may be, we're closer to one child than another. Some of these things, we cannot bubble wrap our kids and make sure they never have any brokenness in their life. One day I was asking the Lord, I started thinking of endless possibilities, and it is important to know some of these things so we can help them unpack the trauma. But one time I became really overwhelmed with all these different ways that people could be deceived into these lifestyles, and the Holy Spirit just flooded my mind with endless possibilities. And I said, Lord, how do I keep these kids from being broken? And he said, you can't. But you can keep them, or that you can lead them to the one that will heal their brokenness. So we can't make sure that our kids will never be broken because they're in this world that's under the curse of sin. This world is broken. Their bodies are broken. And even our mind, as we wrestle against the spirit and the flesh, we're broken people. And yet there's an answer. So we need to not instead of trying to prevent all the possible brokenness, we need to take those situations and use them as teaching moments and lead them to the Lord. So sometimes twins just needing their own identity, I've heard this multiple times, which honestly is proof that this isn't biological. There's no way that in an identical twin, one would be trans and one not if this was biological. But I've know of a case of that, and there's more than one. Or cases where an older brother has a stronger, more masculine body and the younger one, smaller brother feels inferior. This happens a lot. And boys who struggle with gender and sexuality most of the time, in my experience, struggle with feeling inferior to men, feeling like they don't measure up, they don't belong in the world of men. In that world, it's kind of scary because they feel intimidated by it. And so a lot of times the younger brother will just kind of cling to mom and be more effeminate. The good child versus the black sheep. I remember thinking as a young child that I was the black sheep of the family. I heard that term somewhere, and I went, that's me. No one said that to me, but I took that on as a belief. So sometimes perceptions of role in the family or feeling parental lack. This happened to my partner. I had a partner who was a male to female transgender, and his mom died when he was 7 years old. He was the oldest of 4 boys. She died very suddenly. He actually doesn't even know what happened to his mom. His dad just came home, and he had gone to the hospital the night before, and his dad came home and said, boys, your mom is dead, and never said another word about it. And so he was abandoned and feeling, and he just assumed that he was supposed to fill his mom's role because he was the oldest. Sometimes there's defensive detachment where the child will detach from the same-sex parent and cling to the opposite-sex parent. That happened with me because of the things my mom said, and I would push her away, and I really cut her off and built walls against her, and I would cling to my dad. And this happens with boys a lot. This is also really common with where there's marriage trouble. This is why working on your marriage is so important for reaching your LGBT child, because often when there's trouble in the marriage, then sometimes the spouse will become closer with the opposite sex child because you're longing for that opposite sex relationship. And this happens especially with boys and moms and what we call emotional incest. And this can become very unhealthy. And we've got to remember, and especially with boys, Mom, they need comfort as a little boy. We need to nurture and comfort them. But there's a point where they're supposed to grow up and we're supposed to launch them off. And they're supposed to come into the world of dad. And dad is supposed to draw them away from mom, give them security and identity, and help them come into the world of men and to be secure in their place in the world of men. And that's one reason fatherlessness is such a huge problem in this culture. But for many reasons, there are so many statistics on people that end up in jail and on drugs and other things that have come from fatherless homes. But the father is the one who is supposed to secure the child in their identity. And it doesn't mean, and I don't want you to think if you're the father and think if your child is LGBT, that doesn't mean you failed. That's just one thing. There are many things that can play into this. Um, but I do want to highlight that the father is supposed to be the one who helps the child be secure in who they are. So exposure to pornography, sometimes this is accidental at a very young age, but wherever this comes in, our kids have been handed a phone with endless amounts of pornography on their screen. Sometimes this stuff pops up accidentally, and they don't know to look away, and they get curious. And then, but that if they stay on that, then the algorithms will feed them even more, and all of a sudden they can have a serious porn addiction at a very young age. And then pornography that they're exposed to is not like when we were kids and you'd see a picture in a magazine. This is graphic, and I haven't looked at pornography in years now, by the grace of God. But I've been told that the pornography these days is extremely graphic and violent. And so it's terrifying to young girls who are thinking, I don't, if that's what love is, if that's what sex is, I don't want anything to do with it. And to others, it's creating sex addiction. So a lot of unfulfilled roles and unmet needs. The father's role, again, is to secure the child in their identity, draw them away from the security and nurture of mother, bring them and learn to because they're supposed to be leaders. If they're comforted and nurtured by mom all the time, that can leave them stuck in that little boy mode. They've got to learn to come out of that and to begin to be the leader. So mother is supposed to if the mom despises masculinity and disparages it, this can be extremely damaging to a child. So if you've got a boy that grew up with a mom who was maybe very hurt by men, he may have a really distorted view of what it means to be a man. Of course, there are all kinds of abuse that may play into this: sexual abuse, porn exposure, and a lot of child-on-child molestation where they don't even see it as sexual abuse, maybe. That's one reason that I never told anybody this was another kid, and so I just was very intimidated by this. I felt guilty. I blamed myself. A lot of planted ideas. I mentioned this earlier today, but I can't remember what session, about the kid that was on the TLC show I Am Jazz, and as a young boy, he was 2 years old and came to his mom and said, "When is the good fairy going to turn my penis into a vagina?" No 2-year-old knows that language. Somebody said that to him. He heard that somewhere. Now, he says he had a dream about it. He may have had a dream about something he heard. Somebody planted that in his head. And I don't know who, but it has ruined his life. A life he will never get back. In fact, he is falling apart. It is so tragic. There's videos of him from the last year. He is dealing with a lot of depression and mental illness. And he said, he told his mom, "I don't feel like myself ever." And he is so broken. And so we also have people who are doing this. I call Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Parents who are seeking attention. There are people that are intentionally doing to this children. I have seen parents taking babies to pride events and to these drag queen story hours. A lot of peer pressure from social media and other media, social contagion, especially for girls, because girls do everything collectively and always wanting to involve others. And so comparing yourself to others, they're desperate to belong, to be cool, and they're disparaging what's normal. These terms like cisgender, which means that you're not identifying as some other gender, so we would call that normal, or someone who's not identifying that way, but that's become a very derogatory term. Oh, you're just cisgender, you don't understand. And it's like you're outside the club. And there's also with this whole, and I forget a little bit about this, but some of the woke ideology and the, what is it called? I'm trying to think of the term. with the races and the yes, all the social justice stuff where they have like these points basically of oppression, and the people that are most oppressed are suddenly the most celebrated in culture and the most vaunted, and the people that get the special privileges. And so the kids that are, especially if they're white and Christian, and they have these labels that are labeled as oppressors. So there's a testimony I saw one day of a girl who she's now detransitioned, but she said one of the reasons she transitioned is because she didn't want to be an oppressor. She didn't want to be the white Christian girl because it was seen as a bad thing in this culture. So sometimes other psychological conditions, there are high rates of autism among gender dysphoric children. I think one of the reasons for that is because the autistic children already struggle to feel like they fit in. So they don't have a social group, they don't know how to relate. But if they say they're transgender, all of a sudden they have this huge group of friends. So it's a way for them to feel like they fit in without having to really connect on an emotional level. So a lot of depression and anxiety, they're already suicidal, but it's not actually because they need to transition. It's because of all these other traumas and things that we've talked about that aren't being dealt with. And so they're blaming it on this, but studies have shown that people that transition still have the suicide rates are about the same after gender reassignment surgery. So a lot of body dysmorphia and eating disorders, very, very common. Kids hate their body, they hate themselves, and they're wanting to reinvent themselves. So, and remember, they are celebrating this as a higher morality, an exalting of ideology over truth, an exalting of this false love that is a flattering love, and they will tout themselves as being more loving than Christians. They redefine the words, and they're proselyting. They're trying to gain other support because they know they're more powerful if they can get more people to believe this. They're trying to silence the voice of reason and the voice of conviction. They're trying to stuff down their conscience and equating feelings with being, like this guy who I would say is probably from a Christian home because he's talking about sin. He says, I am perfect. I'm not a sin. My love is real. My life is worthy. I won't apologize. I'm proud of being me. So he's equating this feeling and this desire he has with who he is. And that's what kids are not hearing in the church is that what you feel like is not who you are. But they're being manipulated. I mean, who doesn't want to protect kids? And we see these things all the time. I've known people. We've had a few protesters, not a whole lot, but sometimes these people will protest events and they will say protect trans kids. And in fact, Perry and I went to one of the library events that Kirk Cameron did in Arkansas, and there were these trans people who had these signs that were written in pencil. They need some help with their signs. Nobody could read them, so they're like everybody's zooming in on their cameras trying to figure out what these signs say. And of course, the books were called Brave Books, and they just teach really good, wholesome values. And but they were having me speak, so there was a protest against me speaking there. And their sign said, "Is it brave to scare trans kids?" Now, who's scaring trans? These kids, you should have seen what these guys look like. They were in these scary costumes and looked like, I don't know, the horror characters. But so who's the one that's really scaring these trans kids? But they're trying to shame Christians into shutting their mouth. They're redefining love, and they're saying, you hateful, bigoted people. But it's not true. It's a lie of the enemy. The enemy's number one tactic is fear. But God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power and of love and a sound mind. And we got to stop being so afraid of the enemy because Jesus said that the gates of hell would not prevail against the church. The church should be on the offensive, not physically attacking people, but attacking these lies and bringing down the strongholds in this country. Okay, I want to pray this, and you've got to see how they are going after children. I want to play just a clip of this. This is a longer song. Can you go ahead and play this video? Okay, that one should be on there. Doesn't it just fill you with pride, showing who you are on the Doesn't it just fill you with pride, showing who you are on the inside? Wave that pride flag up high, be true to you. Show your pride, wave those flags, everybody. Here we go. Red light, orange, healing, yellow is sunlight, green, nature, blue, harmony, Yeah, that's what. Yeah, see, this was not just some YouTube video. This was on Nickelodeon. In fact, not just Nickelodeon. I think this was actually a Nick Jr. This was to little children. And this is a really catchy song. Every time I worked on editing this video, and I've done it before for other presentations, it gets stuck in my head. It's catchy. But think about the message of this song that talks about there's a lot of New Age spiritualism represented in the flag colors that he talks about. And then it's, we're all in this together. Be kind, be you, be who you are on the inside. Never have to hide who you are. There's a place for you. Loving who you are on the inside. I mean, this sounds so good to a 4 or 5-year-old is going to think these are all good things. But it's planting ideas that should not be there. There's an incredible influence from social media where these kids, I talked about this a little bit yesterday, how so many of these kids are not finding authenticity in the church. We're all acting like we have it all together and we don't have any problems. And they know we're broken. And they know we're not talking about our brokenness. And so they're going on YouTube and TikTok and they're hearing how broken these people are and they're presenting a false salvation that says, the reason I was broken is because I was supposed to be transgender. And these kids, this is a mass exodus from the church because they're seeking and searching for authenticity. And the church has got to get real. We're almost out of time. I'm gonna show you this one clip. So I've gone over a lot of these things anyway. But I want to get to one particular clip that I want to play. Okay, will you go ahead and play this? Oh, you can't see it. Yeah, go ahead and play that one.
9 years on testosterone, and I am extremely stressed. I have surgery after surgery after surgery after surgery. I've almost completed bottom surgery. It has been extremely painful. It has been extremely long-winded, and it has put my life on hold. Warning for guys who think that bottom surgery is going to be a breeze. It is not. You're not. It's just every expectation I had is out the window. It is just it's unexplainable in the video about bottom surgery. I am warning anybody who is maybe thinking of getting bottom surgery to honestly think of the entire picture. You have to. I did, but I ignored all my thoughts. I ignored my feelings and I went and had bottom surgery, and now I am in agony all the time. I'm not saying that's going to be you or somebody else, but I am. And I did nothing wrong other than stick to what I was supposed to do, which was rest, eat good, my body is in good physical health, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter. The surgery didn't go great for me. My surgery failed. Years later, down on testosterone, and I feel like I'm kind of ruined. Mentally and physically. The good effects of testosterone stopped at maybe 3 years. I had this really sexy high schooler looking kind of thing going on, and I looked really like a jock. And my mental is just like all over the place. That's due to like life stress as well as like the tea and everything, and just everything, like everything. I'd give a massive warning, just a huge warning to anybody who is thinking of transitioning or who has transitioned. This whole process, it's been really enjoyable, but it's been really unenjoyable as well. I'm sorry, it has been. I can't lie. They're going to the gym all the time to keep my body in good shape and good health. And then like when you don't want to go to the gym, and it's just like, no, I don't really want to go to the gym today. And you don't go to the gym and you start eating for a bit, like a few months, and then next thing you know, your love handles are back, man. And you got an arse again, and next thing you know, you got a whole that little curvy body, and it's like, hold on, I haven't worked out for like a few months. Why is it all my hard work in the gym is all gone? And remember, I'm 9 years on T. I've had all different surgeries. Like I'm like complete with it into me. You know what I'm saying? Like it's always gonna happen because that's just how biology says so. Like genetics, whatever. It's annoying, bro. It's annoying. Like this whole thing's been it's been about upkeep. Transitioning is about upkeep. You got to upkeep your mind, you got to upkeep your thoughts, you got to upkeep everything's just upkeep, man. I wish I could have done a more positive video about it, but I changed my mind. I was like talking to you guys and I thought, actually no. I changed my mind. Transitioning hasn't been as great as a lot of people make it seem, and I'm not gonna be one of them people to add to the list where I'm gonna deceive people and make them feel like this is all like fun. It's not fun. Everybody goes through hell, man. Now that I've got to the end of it, I'm just exhausted, man. I can't deal with the editing of the videos and the looking good in the videos and the talking nice and the acting like everything's great and I'm happy. I'm not happy. And if I had one wish, I'd never have taken that first testosterone shot. Cause that's where the it hasn't changed me. All it's done is really give me unrealistic expectations and make me, ruin my mind in the process. I was gorgeous before. Now I don't feel so gorgeous because my personality's turned ugly because I've become, obsessed with wanting to look like this and wanting to look like that. Sometimes it's not about positivity or negativity. It's just about being real. Anyway, my name's Rush. Been on T for 9 years. Had full surgery. And I'm exhausted. I'm knackered. And I just thought I'd let everybody know that. Anybody that's wanting to go through the surgery, anyone that wants to watch videos, little quick edited videos, looking all nice, all flexing muscles and talking about tea and my life's changed, la 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 la. Can change your life for the worse as well. You need to think about that instead of being eager to must be on tea, I must this, I must that. Nah, you must have sanity first, man, because I had sanity and now I don't.
So I know that was a little bit of a long clip, but I wanted you to hear that, and that's edited from a longer video. The reason I wanted to show you this clip, this is a girl who transitioned. She had made all kinds of videos for years of how positive this was. She was so glad she transitioned, and this was amazing. She's so glad she did this. And then she made this video. She got on there one day, and I just happened to see it, and was really real and honest about her transition and how horrible it had been. And she says it was just about upkeep, and I've been upkeeping these videos. And she said, I had these surgeries. My surgeries didn't go well. And I don't know if you heard, but she said, I wish I had never taken that first shot. And then she later, thankfully, I downloaded this video. Like I said, I always download the stuff that I find that I'm going to use. And she's since taken that off, went right back to making all these positive videos. And the reason they do this, the reason they all tell you they're happy, and they probably are at first. I mean, like anything new, things are exciting at first. You have this new big change in life. It can seem exciting and fun. But the reason that this is so important, because at some point they begin to realize that this is not real, this hasn't fixed their problems, but they really believe, you have to understand, they believe they are born this way. So the loving thing to do is be positive and encourage everyone else that they can do this. And it's just perpetuating this lie. That's why we have got to continue to spread the truth of the gospel and of these testimonies, share testimonies of people that have come out of this. But don't be afraid of the gospel. Paul said, for I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God unto salvation for everyone who believes. And we have got to remember that the gospel has power. Even if people reject it and they say, oh, I don't want to hear anything about that, or you bigoted, hateful Christian, we never know what God is going to do with those seeds. Because this is God's work in their life, and we've got to believe in the power of the gospel and the power of Christ to change lives, no matter what these people look like, no matter what they're saying now. These are people that God wants to reach. Well, thank you for your time. Do we have break, or I don't know when the next session is? I don't have the schedule.